Morena koutou, tēnei te mihi mahana kia koutou katoa, kua hui mai I tēnei hui o te Community and Services Committee, and welcome to everyone, councillors and visitors today. Good to see you all here. Actually, there's a lot of really positive in this agenda, I am pleased to say, so that's great. Just to note before we go formally into the meeting, there was the passing of a previous councillor. I'm going to invite Martin to say a few words around that, but of course it will be formally acknowledged at council.
Last minute note, Bob Ironton, a former chief executive, passed away. His funeral was yesterday. We had the flag obviously flying at half-mast, flowers going to the family, but we'll obviously do the proper formalities as you would expect at the full council. But it was certainly my privilege to work with him in my previous life in this council, and he was, of course, he came up through the ranks. Very interesting. He came up through the ranks and, you know, cadetships, the whole thing, until he arrived at chief executive. But he never changed in the sense that he was, dare I say, a true public servant, really down to earth, West Coast, and a very genuine, wonderful person who never lost sight of being a true public servant of this city, and just obviously we'll acknowledge him at a full council meeting as we should, but I certainly feel for his family at this time.
Thank you, Martin. And yes, our sincere condolences to the family. Today, councillors, the agenda is as confirmed. I'll get to that in a minute. Having said that, there is a matter for all councillors to be appraised of, so we're going to take an early lunch break at 11:45, and the first half an hour of which should be assumed to be an update, a private update in the councillors' lunchroom, and then you'll be able to go for lunch. So from between 11:45 and 1 we'll be breaking, but please don't go anywhere in the first half an hour. That would be appreciated. Okay, I haven't got any apologies, and the confirmation of the agenda is as circulated. With the exception, we do have a new, you will have a new schedule of reports due, because the other one wasn't quite correct. Someone moved that the agenda be, thank you, Councillor Bunting, seconded Councillor Henry, all in favour. Opposed, carried. Now call for any declaration of interest in any matter. Councillor Hamilton.
I have a family member in Toti Trust, but I don't think it'll be an issue in terms of making impartial decision.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I think we briefly discussed this on the same day as your first council meeting, and decided that you could be sufficiently independent despite that relationship. So brilliant. Thank you very much for putting it to our attention. With public forum, welcome to our guests. I have on my notes here that we are going to hear from Toti and representatives in respect to item 8, which is the upgrade of the Dame Hilda Ross Plaza. Yeah.
I did suggest that a whole lot could come, but no, I think that's enough. I can take a minute, if I may, to endorse Martin's comments about Bob Ironton, and there's an element of serendipity here. Bob was the leader of the first strategic review that brought together Waipa, Waikato and Hamilton City Council in 1972, which culminated in the boundary extensions, so essentially the shape of the city as it is today. And then he also led the 1974 Comprehensive Development Plan. The library has a copy or two, and if you haven't read that, can I advise it would be really, really good for you to read, because he identified peacocks as an area that should be developed sooner rather than later, and certainly ahead of the growth to the north. So there is a bit of a message in there. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful public servant. And after he retired from this council, he went on and did a lot of work as a planning consultant and as a JP. And I went to the funeral yesterday, and it was really good to hear Helen Parkey pass on the message from the City Council.
Thank you for that bit of history. It's
Dame
very
Hilda.
Good to have.
Dame Hilda, another wonderful public servant. And all I'm going to say really today, unless there's any questions, is if councillors turn to page 72, I think that's the best page in the agenda because it does give the overview. And we have had discussions across our various collaborators, and we would happily support the second option, which is the $50,000 option, in the interests of city finances. I'm looking at Lance, and I can't resist, but looking at the paving, I think there's another division of council that may be talked into perhaps planning that. The reason we are supporting this is because, Councillor Paula, as you will know, for those who were involved in our round table, the concept of having a public seating area was very highly favoured. We do need to get on with this if we're going to see the statue installed early next year, largely because of the underground infrastructure issues. We have done a deal with Well Networks, which would enable that very ugly electrics box to be moved off-site. And by you endorsing this concept and making provision for that funding of 15,000, that would enable us to get on with this job. The details of the seating can then be sorted out through our collaboration. One comment, if you look in this picture, you'll see that the sculpture is actually facing, the piano is facing south. We'd like to have some more discussion on that. The child, the artist...
So you look, just for clarity, you're looking at page 17,
yeah, 17.
The picture?
If you look in the centre of the picture, you'll see the sculpture.
Yeah, so you're aware that, sorry, I'm just so councillors don't get confused, that is option 3, isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
but option 2 enables the seating, the central seating bit to be undertaken, but without the paving.
Okay, thank you.
Because the sculpture is integrated with the idea of the public being able to sit and gather around it. So if you look right, you see it's wonderful, isn't it? Because you hardly see it's a sculpture. If you look right in the middle of the artist's impression, you will see the sculpture. The child is actually on its knees, it's not seated like that, but that's just a minor detail. So what we're saying is if you run with option 2, that allows all of us to get on with the finer details and allows that difficult piece of infrastructure relating to the moving of the electric box to be undertaken. Okay. And it also allows us to get on with fundraising, and we've already had a bit of interest.
Okay, so councillors, we will talk about this in the item, but option 2 is the one on page 68, the attachment 2, right? Pardon? Yeah, but yeah, and I was just going to say that staff will take us through that shortly, detail for detail, so that we understand where we're at. But are there any questions for Margaret of clarity on their position? Councillor O'Leary?
15,000, do you mean to say 50, or is there another idea?
No, 50,000.
It is 50.
Is the stage.
Yeah, it's just
stage development.
I just wanted to clear that.
The 15,000 is the pivotal point of this, because that is what the quote is from Well Networks to move the electric box.
Okay.
And the moving of that box needs to be undertaken probably later this year in order for all of the other planning and the work to be completed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everybody. No further questions. Thank you, Margaret. We are, as you will see from the agenda, we are coming fairly quickly up to that item because we've got guests here. So, Council, you will note that the General Manager's report will be lower down item to allow for our guests who are with us to get away into their other business. So, thank you. Thank you for that. Now we'll move on to item number 5, which is the confirmation of the Community and Services minutes from the 31st of October. So that's a while ago. Any questions, comments on that? Being none, can I have a mover? Thank you, councillor Casson. Seconder, councillor Bunting. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Brings us on to the Chair's report. I don't think I will speak to it because I think it's reasonably well articulated, but I'm happy to take questions on it. Great to have some. Councillor O'Leary. Oh, sorry, did I get that wrong order? Councillor Mallett, I think. Apologies, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Your second paragraph, you talk about changing the name of the committee, which got no decision either way, except that surely one of the most important parts of our city is the river in terms of the environment, and the river is pretty much the responsibility of our waters people, which is the Growth and Infrastructure Committee. So in terms of balance with regard to, are you going to cut the environment quite into little bits, and so the river would be run by the Dave's committee, other parts would be run by this committee?
My personal view, Councillor Mallett, is that that's a conversation for how the terms of reference look, what our committee, this C&S committee, would actually cover. But my understanding, and Councillor Casson might want to clarify his own view in proposing this, is that there isn't enough regard given to a whole range of environmental issues that occur across the city, from gully restoration to air projects, to anything you could think of that has an environmental wellbeing aspect hasn't had as much profile in our conversation as it could have. And of course we've been in an LTP year, so we've been really busy with other things, but going forward, councillors, the sustainability plan, action plan and all of those kind of things is something that a number of councillors, including myself, are quite keen to have elevated. Does that answer your question?
No.
Yeah. I've answered
Didn't
the
even
question.
go close. I mean, it's about delegation of duties and
Yes,
delegated responsibilities, and whether or not the river is going to be considered part of the environment, which I assume would then mean it would come to this committee, whereas Dave's committee, clearly, Chris and Andrew Parsons, etc., and all the water, the stormwater, sewage, drinking water, all that sort of stuff, which is all river derived.
Okay, I get your view on that, and I think that's a conversation we can have when we talk about the terms of reference, what is appropriate for this committee and what is appropriate for another committee.
So what is
Councillor
the...
Casson may choose to say some more words on that, since he felt strongly about this issue also. James.
Yeah, well, the reason why I brought this up is because one of the few councils that don't refer to the environment in our committees, and I got the idea from Auckland, who have their community environmental services committee, as that's what it's called. So they look after all sorts of things. You know, they've got the viaduct and everything they look after there as well, which is a waterway. You know, we look after the river, which is true, and it comes under Dave for the infrastructure, but that's actually taking the water out and putting it back in after treating. So I find that a little bit different compared to just the water running through the city, which I don't think actually runs under infrastructure at all. I think it does come under the environmental part of council business and how we look after it. That's where I'm coming from.
But how we look after it is fundamentally, I mean, there's lots of things, there's slips and all that sort of stuff, but primarily it's about what we do with the water we take out and what we do with the water when we put back in it. That's the
so we're not going to get
fundamental
into debate, but I guess the clear message is there are a number of activities, from gullies to parks to planting to water quality to air quality and a number of other things in between, biodiversity, that may be usefully considered under the Community and Services Committee. And Councillor Mallett, you will be able to participate in that conversation. We are just trying to get that conversation brought forward.
So what would be the steps that would happen from that if people want, if you want, and you go ahead with it, but what are the steps that would happen?
We will have a conversation about what would be the potential. We would have a closer look at what the potential terms of reference might include, and bring that back to council for a decision at some stage. And don't forget, there is a mid-term review of committees. Thank you. And that isn't very far away now. I think it's a month and a half away or so. And so that might be a good time to have a really good look at that. I can't say anything more on that. I'll take further questions. Councillor O'Leary?
So we'll come up with
Sorry.
staff come up with a first cut, and then we'll have discussions with elected members about that. Obviously, there needs to be, you're right, there needs to be demarcation lines. There'll probably always be grey areas where there's overlap, and around growth, you know, community infrastructure with, you know, roading infrastructure and stormwater infrastructure, you know, e.g. around the HIF or the Peacocks area, you know, that's an integrated approach across the council and that sort of thing. So, and that's why we need to work through those terms of reference and the powers to act and all those sorts of things that's in the front of the agenda. And then you're right, then potentially there's flow-on effects to other committees too. But I think my experience would be take a reasonably pragmatic approach to that, but you guys will be included in that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
We would approve it, wouldn't we?
Councillor,
We would approve it.
yes, absolutely. There'll be a process for that. Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do agree with the sentiment, and the committee does have, one of our purposes is to fund environmental initiatives. However, I do respect the Mayor's position on setting, and actually right to set up committees at the start of the term, and he did set up...
Question on that?
Yeah, I'm coming to it. Set up a structure for a reason to support his priorities. So I'm a little bit hesitant to do that via committee, because I think that's his delegation. So, okay, that wasn't a question. My question is, on the first paragraph, we are apparently reviewing the Central City Transformation Plan. When was that decision made, General Manager, and by whom was it made?
Where are you looking?
By the first paragraph? The review of community development.
These are
delivery?
all on the time schedule. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's more around the actions that, and obviously there's actions that are in the LTP, so actually working through those, because at the end of the day we've got an approved plan of council, and then actually we've got a bunch of actions which have been happening, and then there's some which have been put into the LTP. So I think it's actually about bringing that back and actually reviewing that. So probably the terminology is probably not quite right.
So am I assured that this is not a wholesale review of the Central City Transformation Plan?
No, sorry.
No,
This
it's
is
mainly
just
around actions.
an update of looking at the action list and where we're at. And of course, at any time, council can decide to dismiss the plan. That's fine. But my concern there was that decision hasn't yet been made.
My apologies, I probably put the chair crook on that one. So.
We were just trying to highlight some of the priority work. That was all that was going to be considered. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I might note, in terms of the environmental issues, waste is an extremely big one of council that should be included in any discussion on the environment. But my question relates actually to your paragraphs 3 and 4 on page 13, Chair.
Yes.
But firstly, I'd like to correct your spelling of Andy Mannering's surname. I think it's good to get the staff names right. Secondly, I'm pleased to see that you've noted the lack of inflation proofing for the community grants. So what I want to ask you, because I note in the paragraph 4 you say after the 10-year plan council holds a discussion on this, would you be prepared to join me in proposing during the annual plan, the LTP discussions, that we inflation-proof it from year 1 onwards?
I would say I'm favourable to inflation-proofing it and having that discussion, yes.
During the 10-year plan discussions, not afterwards, like you've suggested.
Yeah, no, during, if it was a possibility to do it that way.
Thank you.
And the main reason for putting these 2 paragraphs in is because I did the multi-year grants and oversaw the process, and I'm just about to embark on the single-year grants. And I thought it was useful feedback for councillors that went around the table. And Ziggy's nodding. Thanks. Sorry, Andy, and I know how to spell your name properly. Thank you. Okay, so next is Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. It's just a quick follow-up one. In October, I was
that in the last meeting regards paragraph 1 on page 14, regards council's participation in community events. I was asking about the possibility of some form of roster or some form of whiteboard or some form of notification of all the community events that were coming up. Has anything progressed on that, or because nothing seems to have changed in my world?
I think it's probably best, Lance, that you comment on what's in place to facilitate those events.
Well, Mark's right, nothing's changed, but I've been talking to Leanne's team about that. We, and obviously Andy's team's involved in a lot of community events. We've been looking at it several different ways and what's the most efficient way of actually giving you better information. We haven't quite finished that piece of work yet. Happy to talk to any councillors that have a particular interest in that. If you have ideas on what would work for you better, then let us know as soon as you can, and then we want to get that going because obviously we've got, we're into the year now and there's quite a few events coming up. So if you've got any ideas, maybe I'll talk to you offline about that.
Yeah, cool. No problem. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gallagher?
Yes, certainly applaud the inflation proof of a community grants. Logically, if I've got this right, basically the terms of reference for this committee, name, etc., will wait till after the LTP process mid-year, because, for example, we had an unsuccessful motion to have a $2 million social housing fund that Dave and I and the Mayor moved, and in democracy that failed. But, for example, if that got up again, then logically you'd be adding that, just hypothetically, be adding that to the terms of reference for this committee. So what I want to say through the chair is we need to look really closely at what comes out of the LTP, because it could very well be river plan, all of that stuff. To the GM, what can you just clarify? And obviously you do this through the Mayor's office, because Angela's right around the Mayor initially puts his revised committee structure. What sort of time span are you from the management executive team expecting on this?
Well, we're hoping to have a good look at it. We've done some initial work over the next couple of months. I've been talking to Leanne just about tying it in with the what have been planned around the half-term review of the terms of reference of committees, and just making sure there isn't, if there's an appetite for that, then we can do that. So what we'd see happening is actually working that through, like I said before with Councillor Mallett's question, and then actually bringing that back to councillors for some feedback. We'll see it happening over the next 3 or 4 months maximum, but if councillors wanted us to slow that down, that would probably tie in with the LTP discussions. And obviously, my hunch is that we probably need a briefing to take councillors through that to make sure that everyone's comfortable. Councillor McPherson's brought up a good point around waste. There was one about water, so I think it needs to be carefully thought through. It's probably a bit bigger than what people think. Sure,
because Councillor Southgate, the chair of this committee, correctly, has raised our oversight of environment initiatives, but the waste is a good example where that might sit in terms of reporting, in terms of the delineation between a contract to do the stuff versus the objectives. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to reconfirm, we're happy to leave it till the mid-term review of the committees. So we've got enough on our agendas at the moment. Councillor Henry?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to you on page 14, the second paragraph. Just could I just have some clarification what you mean by "I remain of the view"? That sentence there.
Oh, it's a follow-on from the sentence above, where I would like after the LTP to look at ways of increasing community engagement, and it's my considered opinion that we need to take council out into the community more, rather than have always people come to us and submit this way. It's a view I hold, and I'm not expecting all of my colleagues to agree with me on that, but I would like to see us, and of course the Chief Executive originally had some budget around best community, public participation and community engagement, which didn't go forward into the LTP at this time. Having said that, I do think we can collectively consider how we can do best public engagement that we can, and in my view that would involve going out a little bit more to where the community are.
Okay, so you're happy to see some ideas if we have got some ideas to come towards you? Okay.
It won't be what I think is the best. It'll be
Yeah.
a conversation, a guided conversation with staff and with councillors as to how we might do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so unless there's... Sorry, microphone.
Debate, 10
Yes,
seconds.
that's fine.
One, I think this, obviously, isn't it wonderful you do have a community development committee back? You know my views, so we've got it back, let's keep it. I just think the role of a chair, for what it's worth, colleagues, is very important of our standing committees because you have a blush and a flavour, and I think it's really good, as Dave does in the G&I, to raise issues of topical moment, and it gives us a good opportunity to debate those things that don't come through a normal agenda process. I think we need to perhaps, as I'll be discussing with the delineation between the GM's report, how that's also used to raise issues of immediate moment, but I do think either the GM or the Chair's report are very good devices, particularly in this committee around the social area, but compliments on your report, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Move that it be received. All in favour? Against? Thank you. Carried. That brings us on to... Pardon? Oh, no, we didn't. Moved by Councillor Bunting, seconded by Councillor Henry, and we're all in favour. Thank you. Oh, we're going so smoothly. That brings us on to the next item, which is the age-friendly Hamilton plan, which is quite exciting. Oh, I didn't see you there, Peggy, hiding behind the chair. Welcome. So, yes, Dame Peggy. Thank you very much, and thank you for spending some time with us the other day, going through the detail of this. I'm looking forward to what you have to say in the questions of council.
Good morning, Chair and Mayor Andrew and councillors. It's very exciting to present the age-friendly Hamilton plan to you today. Just a few comments on council's role in this. This is very much a community-led plan. It has been devised by our age-friendly steering group, which has been very ably led by Dame Peggy, of course, and there's several members of the steering group here today as well. Council's role here is really to support and enable this plan to happen. We are there to help the steering group through this process. So we're here today to present the plan and seek your endorsement of this plan. Presuming that's successful, it will then be sent to the World Health Organisation, and if it is included in the age-friendly global network, that will actually be in New Zealand first. We'll be the first city in New Zealand to be a part of that network, which has about 500 cities around the world. So it's a really exciting opportunity for Hamilton to really set in New Zealand first. I really just wanted to emphasise what council's role was there and pass over to Peggy to make some comments before we then take some questions from you.
Thank you, Nick. I think it's, Dame Peggy, if you can point out, flesh out on what is expected of council, because I'm sure that will come up as a question. It did in our conversation, so that would be great. Thank you for that.
Councillor Southgate and councillors, members of the Hamilton City Council staff and the public, and some colleagues here from community organisations and the steering group. When the Age-Friendly Hamilton Steering Group was set up and started planning for a better Hamilton, we were actually quite impressed with the amount of facilities, services, policies that Hamilton already had, and also the Hamilton City Council. And in fact, today's agenda is a really good example of the awareness that the council has already got for its increasing numbers or the existence of older people. On your agenda today, you're considering open spaces, the celebrating age policy, and you're honouring one of the older members, Dame Hilda Ross. So you really are already to be commended for thinking about older people. But we have increasing numbers of older people right across the country and the world in Hamilton. And with some further community initiatives, Hamilton can do better, which is quite impressive, actually. And here today, we will present to you a plan. Now, just sort of off the table a little bit, the alternative could be perhaps waiting for an angry crowd of older people protesting up Victoria Street, and some of you might be there too. So instead what we have done... Not this week. And not this week, righto. But instead what we've got is an initiative from the Hamilton community on the process for airing their views and also a plan for what to do about it. And so I would just like to present it to you. You've got it in your hand, but I would like to acknowledge the fact that while it has been of very little cost to the Hamilton City Council, you have provided the support and expertise of Nick here, who's done an excellent job, and the Office for Nick Chester, and the Office for Seniors has made a very small payment to get the graphics up to scratch. But otherwise, I would have to say that the steering group members were unpaid volunteers. Their photograph is on page 53. And the resources required in the future will come from existing organisations. So in front of you, a 4-year plan beginning this year till 2021. It's got 48 projects in it. It has, outside the Hamilton City Council, about 2/3 of them. If you begin at page 33, you will see there a list of the areas that we are talking about, open spaces, transport, and so on. And then we go on to look at the projects which we are putting forward from page 34, beginning with open outdoor spaces. And we look at projects which are new and in many cases quite innovative. Other ones which are enhancing what's already we've got, because one of our principles has been to build on what already exists. And the third one is continuing ones, because we've got some really good ones which we thought we would cunningly profile in this document, because this is going to have an international audience from the World Health Organization in Geneva. Now, I'd like to just perhaps choose some of my favourites on page 35 and number 1.1 from the Hamilton City Council itself is, and I quote, "To the Ferrybank project as part of the river plan will incorporate age-friendly facilities and hopefully the theatre." So we've already got that in as a project. Another one which I really rather like on page 37, coming from the Settlement Centre, Waikato, the Hamilton Multicultural Services Trust, to promote, and I just am reading from it, to promote open road driving training to older migrants and refugees. And there's another one for bikes. A third one from the Rauawa Kamatua Charitable Trust, and we have Yvonne Wilson in the public gallery as a previous person with that, to continue the Rauawa Annual Olympics and Kamatua Ball for older people. Now, did you know that that existed? And that's got to be really quite unique. And the final one I will just pinpoint is page 49, to do with the Office for Seniors, New Zealand, the New Zealand Police, and Age Concern. And we have Evelyn Ware in the public, who has been the New Zealand President here, the New Zealand President of Age Concern, and also in the Hamilton group. And that group of people, the project to extend awareness, 8.5, to extend awareness and reporting of elder abuse projects. Now, there are 48 projects, and I've just put my finger on 4 or 5, some continuing, some enhancing, and some which are new ones of this. This morning, as Nick has said, we would like the council to support these projects so that we can send them on to the World Health Organization. Now, the question is, why would we do that, and what are the benefits? Why should we do this? Well, firstly, I would say that obviously older people in Hamilton will directly benefit from the new projects, and perhaps some of us sitting here today will remember today when they hit those particular facilities. Secondly, Hamilton City will join an international network of age-friendly cities which share ideas. Now, it would be really nice for us, for example, to follow the international movement at the moment, which says that playgrounds should be intergenerational. That when parents and grandparents take their children to the playgrounds, they too should be doing some exercise. I don't see too many of those in Hamilton, but we have already got that in the international literature. So one of the advantages would be that we get access to new and interesting ideas internationally. And the third one would be that it would raise the profile of Hamilton City. Nick has already said that we will be the first New Zealand city to be acknowledged internationally as age-friendly. Many of our projects are innovative, and I would expect that they will be borrowed by some of the internationals who say they come from Hamilton, New Zealand. That's nice. And finally, I would say that overall, it would raise everyone's awareness of the need to recognise the increasing number of older people in Hamilton, the implications, and to allow older people to actually, and the ageing Hamiltonians, to actually play a role in working out how we're going to deal with this increasing number of old people. My final word, all this at no cost to the Hamilton City Council, because it is community driven. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dame Peggy. I was aware of the Kaumata Games. I was there last year and I've been asked to put a team together, councillors, for this year. Does anybody want to join me? I don't know, the colour of my hair would tell you I probably can attend the Kaumata Games. Okay, so we have quite a few questions actually, as expected. Councillor McPherson, you're first.
Thanks, and thanks for this, Peggy. I was actually quite impressed at the number of practical things that are projects that are in here, and I particularly went straight to the transport pages on the 36 and 37. And I looked on the left, I want to ask you a question about this. 2A in the shaded bit, you've got the middle of the 3 bullet points is about our footpath issues, which are not just issues for older people, are issues for almost everyone.
Yes.
But we have a system of funding transport in New Zealand that includes government subsidies for everything except footpath maintenance and upgrades.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering, is there an advocacy sort of arm to the older to the age-friendly city policy that can join with us, because we're already advocating to the government on that, as are some other councils and other areas like this where we need to change central government policy or some outside agency's policy?
You're asking me and the steering group to organise that protest group?
Well, you said it was free to us.
I mean, the short answer to that is I really don't know. But
Yeah.
if we believe that to making footpaths more accessible in the way we have described, that is what we call an example of universal design. And if it's good enough for if it's good for older people, it's good for everybody.
Yep.
But by targeting our older people, you can't do everything for everybody, but just targeting older people, get them onto it, and if we can solve it for them, then for the prams as well. Now, if you're looking at advocacy, I'm not ironically heavily into advocacy, but I could ponder it, yes.
Well,
could you mentor me, please?
Okay, we'll do that. There's some other areas here as well which
Yes,
have
yes.
outside organisations which are exceptionally good ideas, but we're going to have to sell the idea to someone else.
Well, we've already done that with a lot of these projects. We have spent a lot of time, we being particularly Nick and I and also the steering group members, have spent hours and hours working with, let's say, Sports Waikato, Age Concern, those sorts of people, the banks, in making the technology of putting in your money more accessible for older people. you know, it's a matter of just continuing it, really. Every time you have another project, and we assume this is just the start, okay? And you can expect a report on how we're going in a year's time or so, and that report will probably, it will include, let's say, another 10 projects, and to do all of that, we would have had to be advocates.
Yes.
To some extent, we're underselling ourselves because we've actually been advocates to get it here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good,
Yeah,
thanks.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you, and thank you for all your work you've done, Dane, Peggy. Just the recommendation we've been asked to do talks about endorsing and supporting.
Yes.
When does endorsing ever morph into enforcing?
No. No. Because the projects are, shall we say, self-evaluating and self-enforcing. And some...
So what does that mean?
What does what mean?
Self-enforcing.
That they carry it out in the way that they decide, and
But they is, sorry.
they are the community organisations.
Okay, but sometimes you're talking about footpaths and,
Yes.
and things like that.
Yes, Hamilton City Council.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are you suggesting there should be, like we should, and I'm a bit cautious of my terminology here, that,
That's
that
all right.
the code for building a footpath should
Yes.
say no more cobbles because cobbles are play havoc with walkers and
Yes, that's
things like
right.
that. And I'm, you know, I agree with that
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
But and I don't, the implications of that, there are lots of things like, you know, Victoria on the river here.
Yes.
Lovely environment. I've been there a number of times, and there are elderly folk walking down those lovely, but there are
Yes.
kids on bikes
Yeah.
and skateboards.
Yeah.
You know, and those, they're like sort of oil and water, aren't they? Those
Yeah.
two things. You don't
That's
want to
right.
have them together.
No.
So I just wonder where we get the demarcation, because you talked, and I understand what you meant when you said things that are good for older folks are generally good for everyone else, but that's an example where the two don't combine well, aren't they?
Well, we've actually talked about this one before, and that's not to say we shouldn't do it again. But one of the we're working on solutions for that. Okay, and one of the obvious ones for a few of the older members in the room is bikes, bells on bikes. Okay.
So who would be riding the bikes?
Anybody, older people, younger people. And there could be, I'm inventing this script, there could be a Hamilton City Council regulation which encourages, demands, expects people who have bikes within the limits of the city have a bell on them. Now, I'm just using that as an example where you might have to move to requiring the Hamilton City Council to do something in paper. But generally speaking, all of these projects have been negotiated, and some of them certainly did not start off as they're written in the project, in the document. Okay, because it's a community initiative, and the community has to be allowed to be flexible in how it deals with the issue.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crux of what I'm doing.
Yes.
We are primarily a regulatory body.
Yes.
We make rules.
That's right.
You know, we try and encourage people to do things, but
Yeah.
when push comes to shove, we make a rule.
That's right.
Which becomes the force of law, or
That's
we
right.
can rate people for it, or we can prosecute
Councillor Mallett,
people.
I think that
Yeah, so
Peggy has
thank you,
answered it.
thank
Next
you,
question,
Paula.
different question?
Yeah.
So that comes back to the crux of what I'm saying. What in here requires us to change our rules?
Yeah, that's too hard.
I think there's nothing in here that's enforcing us as council to change anything that
No, I
we're
don't
doing.
think so.
This is, by joining the network, it's really just a way of showing that the city has a commitment to moving towards being more age-friendly. If in 4 years' time we decide that we don't want to continue with that, we don't have a revision of the plan and we drop out of the network, then that's fine. There's nothing that's compelling us to stay there, making us change anything that we're doing. It's really just a signal that we want to become a more age-friendly city over time, and this is our first step. There's nothing there that's enforcing us to do anything.
So moving forward, would suggestions be that from now on there is some sort of code, and I might even support these sort of things. I'm not being. I don't mean to be negative. Is that all footpaths are built like this, or bus shelters are built like this?
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Because it helps people with with disability type issues or
I think that kind
mobility type issues.
it goes a little bit back to Councillor McPherson's comment before, that hopefully this is going to change viewpoints and help improve advocacy over time, so that these become issues that you as decision makers are more aware of as we go forward in time.
Okay, thank you. Have you finished, Councillor Mallett? Okay, Councillor Toomey.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. If we go to page 37, and if we come down to 2.7, where you've said provide driver refresher training for older residents who are near driving reassessment age. Currently, of course, it's really up to the medical profession. You get a medical at 75, which takes you through to 80, 5-year block, and then at 80 you get a 2-year tickle from the doctor. Does this actually apply to those persons who have actually failed the medical, or it's been recommended that they do a practical?
No. The AA also has similar courses for people who are approaching the test for, let's say, the 75-year-old one, and have never had a test since they were 15. They have sort of little idea of what a driving test might include, and so this is a way in which those residents would be assisted to increase their confidence, almost in exam sitting as much as driving a car.
Yeah, because there's no requirement at all for a person to do a practical test unless the doctor actually orders it.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one, of course, is that you've got promoting cycling and as an alternative transport, and of course we all know that cycling is the new golf out there in the world.
Yes.
And you've only actually got it for new refugees and migrants.
Yes.
I noticed that there's a lot of high-vis elderly people who probably spend more time at the cafe than they actually do cycling. But if we could actually increase this to include the whole older people, all older people.
Yes, that is, you're quite correct, but in this particular case, we are asking, or the Settlement Centre at Waikato and the Multicultural Services Trust are taking responsibility for looking after this particular group. As opposed to, I don't think any group would want to try and help everybody.
Okay.
You see, it's a targeting question.
Yeah. And just the last one is mobility scooter training. I know a few years back there, Judy Small and I did some training with rest homes and these sort of people.
Oh, okay.
Are we looking at maybe a mobility scooter, should we say, course, so that they can select the right type of scooter and all that sort of stuff? If we could
Excellent,
put that
thank
in there.
you.
Okay.
You're on my list, thank you. This is what we have done for the last 2 years. You know, ideas come from anywhere. We hadn't thought of that. That's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're finished, Councillor Toomey. Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
I knew I'd get Leo on a bike. This is fantastic. On a similar vein, Dame Peggy, I just seek your knowledge, actually, as we look to more of an alternative transport corridor set up rather than just cars, bikes, etc. Mobility scooters, where internationally do they go? Do they go in cycle lanes, footpaths or roads?
Yes, and yes, anywhere.
Right. Where would you prefer, or where is it working?
I'm quite familiar with the Netherlands situation, where they have fietspad for motorbike, for bicycles.
Yes.
But in the very small villages with which I'm familiar, they run on footpaths. They go on footpaths.
Right.
So I think it's almost, I won't say anything goes, but in various villages and cities, it is decided, let's say by a group like this, that people in this city on motor scooters will drive on footpaths.
Right.
And I saw one the other day in Hamilton East, whereas in Auckland it might be somewhere else, okay?
So where would you prefer?
It's partly due to the existing infrastructure. So one of our principles is to build on what already exists. In a new subdivision, let's say St Kilda's in Cambridge, I would hope that they have worked that one out to allow the people in that retirement village to go out of there and down the road on the footpath or whatever.
Yeah, because I see a lot of new infrastructure going in. I see cycleways here, which is great.
Yes.
I see footpaths here,
Yes.
but as you say, it's becoming a major
It is.
method of transport, isn't it?
And if I may say so, they do not get an honourable mention in your transport plan, and actually no other authority in New Zealand either. So you could well be the first lot to think about it for Hamilton.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Henry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dame Peggy. I love the idea of older people protesting down the main street. I'll come with you. That's awesome. Look, just a couple of questions. Playgrounds for older people. Have you seen any around the world? Where would we look?
Yes, I have. In the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And also in Singapore and in China.
Fantastic.
Yes, and just a very simple one. You as grandparents or energetic middle-aged people will have observed that this is the ground, and you have little steps which the 4-year-old can go up, the 6-year-old, the 10-year-old, okay? And beside it, you just have one for grandma and grandpa, which is different colour, and they can hold hands.
Fantastic.
And that's marvellous.
Yeah.
Okay, and also swings. You will notice swings today. Years ago, if you were over 10 or 12, you were not allowed on a swing, but now you are. So these are all because the oldies are getting there.
They're getting younger.
Yeah, well, that could be true too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to. I'll check them out online because I've wanted to see that for ages. Most mothers just sit there and watch their children play. They don't actually play with them, and that's my hot button. We need to play together, whatever age it is.
That's
we
right.
need to play together. The other thing is it's about the housing, and you talked about, and I'm totally with you on that, for older people, it's more village-type arrangement you would like to see. And I've just talked to a property developer who would like to do something like that. Have you just checked, is that possible in our district plan to do something more? Like I've seen in the Netherlands where there's a combination of older people living with young students and a combination of housing and housing models. Is that possible for our district plan? Do you know?
Well, I would hope that you collectively know.
That response is probably better.
Yeah, it's
from
probably better
staff
from
who have that understanding of the district plan.
Yeah.
But do you want to make a comment, Lance? Not really.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Well, we will not answer that question. We will get an appropriate answer from staff around how that might look in the district plan. Is that okay?
That'd be lovely. Thank you so much.
If I might say so, under 3.3, expand the number of Kamatua villages in Hamilton, in particularly in a lifestyle manner appropriate to older Maori people. The local people here have been successful in building a more, what I would call in the European way, a more collective style of housing. One of them is in Fairfield, Enderley, and another one is being planned. We also have, and I think that model, while appropriate for the Kamatua, could well be appropriate for many other people in our society. So we're looking forward to seeing how it goes.
Thank you.
Can I
You're
just-
right. I was having some interesting conversations with Tainui around their papakainga aspirations as well. It's quite exciting.
Can I just ask one more question, just coming back to that? Have you seen the co-housing model that's in Auckland, in Ranoi? Do you know about co-housing? Even not said, yeah.
Not in Auckland. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
because that's another way of community living with,
Yeah.
with different age groups together and looking not after each other, but looking out for each other.
Yeah,
That's their
thank you.
motto.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher. you're next.
One or two comments in debate. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Margaret Wilson and former councillor Malcolm Brooker in the chamber today. My question is probably more, I guess, addressed to Nick. What I'm trying to work out is the actual, as we do, we focus on implementation as a council, so we have bits that we're responsible for. Do I assume that that'll be coming through the GM's report? Where does that happen so we can track how we are doing.
Right. So it's a community-led report, so it's not something that council's directly responsible for, but what we will have is, coming out of this, the steering group will be dissolved but replaced by a implementation group who will meet 2 to 3 times a year, check in with all the agencies who are responsible for various actions, see how they're going, and bring a report back to council annually to let you know how things are tracking, so that you've got an eye on that.
You might, Dame Peggy, you might want to reflect on that frequency, because obviously, as you do, the Mayor regularly meets as the MPs, particularly the government MPs, who are now our dear and closest friends. We're very adaptable. But why I say that is very critical, that if there's an area which is in the central government area, I would argue that the council should be right there with you in terms of advocacy. If regional council, and this is close to Dave Maxhart, are not doing the stuff we think they should do because we have a partnership with them on public transport, you know, we want to hear sooner than later. So I would just perhaps leave with you the issue of the frequency and the type of reporting. So there's stuff that we have to do, but there's stuff that we have partnerships, regional and advocacy. Okay, thank you.
We did discuss that in our catch-up, that it could be 6 months, and it depend on that particular aspect, whether it would go to Councillor McPherson's committee if it was an infrastructural matter, or would come with community services, but definitely no less than an annual full report back on progress.
I actually think that the group would like you to know. It's not a question of the Hamilton City Council sort of saying, here, where are you up to? I think the reverse. We are very pleased to tell you about all this which is going on. And please, if you've got any other ideas, add to it, sort of thing.
So that I guess what I need, you know, as an individual person around this table, is the intelligence, you know, from the out there.
Yes.
And obviously, if there is a road blockage, or we're not, even we want to know what our performance is clearly.
Yeah.
But I believe, as a council and a lobbyist with regular contact with different other agencies, we should be able there to lobby.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, I'd also like to thank Dame Peggy and the very talented team for such a readable report. We don't get reports as frequently as we would like that are so readable. My question follows on from Deputy Mayor Gallagher, and I'd like to see some clear ownership in the plan. It seems to me that we go through the endorsement process. The UN endorses us as an age-free, and then the report potentially might sit on a coffee table somewhere and gather some dust. So I'd like to see a little more teeth around that implementation group, given that this group...
You're leading to a question, Councillor
Yeah,
Pascoe?
that is... and so I'm not sure what you've had in your discussions that will ensure that this group does continue with some teeth and is able to constantly or regularly remind us of what we could be doing.
Thank you. I think you did answer that before, but have you got anything else you prefer to add, or Lance can...
Well, maybe out of that comment and the comments at the end of the document on evaluation and where to from here, we should write that up in a little more detail and present it as an addendum or something to this report. And what we're talking about is reporting the overall progress of the project. That's sort of the monitoring part. And also, secondly, what I would call an innovative part. That would be a listing of any further projects that had come to our notice and which we are encouraging, which is what the Deputy Mayor is asking for, to be kept up to date with ongoing developments.
Thank you. We'll get to this item later in the report, councillors, but just to alert you that the next update is already in here for, I can't remember, no, there's no further update yet, but yes, we should, looking at the second line down, sorry, but we do intend to schedule it into meetings. It's not there though, Lance?
So, yeah, I've made a point. What I'm picking up is minimum 6 monthly. I think Councillor Rob, you were saying that if anything topical comes up, then Nick can report that through the GM's report at any time or the Chair's report.
Yep, okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Second question is just on chapters 4 and chapter 4 on social participation and chapter 7 on communication. And I'm reflecting here on our recent deliberations in the 10-year plan. Do you think that council might have jumped the gun in some of our deliberations, which fire perhaps quite contrary to what your findings are in this report? And I look at the digitalisation of City News, which was a very close vote, and then we had 2 votes on CapEx to improve the Chartwell and Hillcrest libraries and the library network and capacity, both of which were lost as a result of casting votes. Do you think that we may have jumped the gun, that there is still a window there where, in terms of achieving that social participation and maintaining communication, that we still have a window of maybe 10 or 12 years before our older generation then catch up with the digital age?
No. I think what you're saying makes a great deal of sense, but remember that anybody under about 80 or 75 now has worked and used computers and digital technology. And so we've got about statistics just over 80% apparently access to computers and so on, and they're worried about this for the census, of course. So that group of people, older people who are not using digital technology will not be with us, so to speak. And we are now getting older people who use technology as well as anybody else. But your general point with respect to communication is seriously important. And this is why we, in the document, on the left page of each of these 9 topics, we have documented what the older people said, and there are some criticisms there, but a lot of positive stuff as well. And then secondly, what we have in Hamilton. And now what you're suggesting, Councillor Pascoe, is that there is a bit of a mismatch in communication here. And we know that from what older people have said, and we're trying to fix it. But not 20 years, no, in the next 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you. We have one further question, Councillor Hamilton.
I'll be brief, not so much a question, but as a new boy here, Dame Peggy, I just want to applaud the work you're doing in carrying the can for this group. Yeah. You said it's a New Zealand first, or that's something that I think we can...
It is a New Zealand first.
I think that's something that...
Small f.
I'm glad you corrected yourself too, yeah. But no, I think that's to be applauded. And what I like about your proposal is that it's synergistic with council. You haven't come on saying this is what we need to fix, correct or do. No. It doesn't place a burden on council. No. And I think if more people proposed in that spirit, we're in a good place.
Thank you. I've indulged you there in the question time, Ryan, because debate now comes, and that would be normally where you would, but that's fine. It's a learning thing, isn't it? Thank you very much, and thank you for coming today, your team and the team that wasn't able to be here on the photo on page 53. Very much appreciated. We'll go into comments or debate, and then we'll vote. Councillor Gallagher.
I make a point with our 10-year plan, and I'm not sure, and again, any observations that the steering group would make would be absolutely welcome, and there were references, as you expect, and in a democracy we have votes on various things. Casting votes obviously are there for a reason. The Mayor, for example, promoted a special social housing fund, which he was unsuccessful in gaining the numbers around this table. But obviously there are things like that, and again, the debates are up there in the web, etc. So, and I'm meaning this in a constructive way, not for you to take sides with this or that, but if there are things that are consistent, with this plan that we are perhaps not doing or could do better. For example, I noticed your observation on the river plan access stuff, very, very important. I just want to make the point, colleague, that while this is an age-friendly plan, really it is the family, people, youth-friendly plan, because anything that happens here obviously benefits everybody. I also want to say, and this is not to hand out faint praise, if you look on page 53 of our report and you see who's on this steering group, in the old days you'd have talked of heavy hitters or heavy substance. I mean, look, Dal Hood, for example, you know, former head of our population health team, Graham Kitto, sorry to name drop, active in the educational, judicial fields, you name it, you look in there. So what I'm actually saying to you, colleagues, we would be stupid not to plug in to that experience base and also a historical context. And I think that's very important. I think it also highlights for us that there are many people in our community who have made incredible contributions to the city and then kind of, as age happens, gets forgotten about, isolated. So I think also that social engagement to actually plug in to a whole range of citizens who have got obviously considerable capacity and considerable context for us. But I just want to compliment the steering group on obviously a report. As you know, in the past we have had elder advisory councils. Respectfully, I think they were good, but I think this now has landed us in a much better place in terms of the substance of advice that you're able to give to us, and also the substance of advocacy with other agencies as well. And quite bluntly, our government MPs and senior officials should be fearful when they meet with you people. And I mean, and I don't mean that in a sort of a patronising way, but I mean in the sense that you will be expecting from them and us, on behalf of a chunk of our community, action and progress. And to me, us adopting this plan, obviously, and making sure it is successfully implemented is of beneficial to all people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. We are in debate now, aren't we?
Yes,
yeah,
we
yeah.
are.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I echo the congratulations and the thanks for the work that's been done. I just want to be a little bit cautious. This is not going to be all rainbows and roses. There is a heck of a good reason why societies have separated the young from the old, and that is the two often do not combine. I mean, there's a reason why swings normally have an age group, because A, the swings were built for smaller bodies, and or there was an attempt to try and stop bigger kids hogging the swing. So there's a whole lot of stuff where we haven't, I mean, you got to look at the other side, and it's simple stuff like, you know, when skateboarders and Zimmer frames get together, it's not a good thing. You know, bad things happen, and it's you know, we talked about this report here talks about cobbles on footpaths and trees on footpaths, and trees on footpaths ruin footpaths and they become dangerous. So there's a whole lot of conflicts which a lot of us have all forgotten about. We're kind of thinking about the sweetness and love, but we've forgotten that there's a whole lot of reality that we need to build into this thing. So I'm just cautiously supportive. I again am concerned at the word, we've got the word endorse, and I think that will probably morph into enforce somewhere along the line, because that's what always happens with these things. Dame Peggy shaked her head, but that does concern me. But yeah, I will support this going forward, but again, I just caution that there's a lot of fishhooks in this that when you're at a presentation like this, it may not be pleasant to think about them, but they're all there, because you know, most of what's gone on in the past had a very good reason behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallett. But by the way, I should go and mover in a seconder, so I'm happy to move. Seconder? Yep, Councillor Ziggy. And you're next in debate.
Thank you so much. Well, I just want to echo it as well, that this is a fabulous piece of paper that will be put into action. I'm pretty sure. Look, we're all not that super young here either anymore, but we are still young at heart. And I think today's 60s are the new 40s. Or even 70s are the new 40s. The world has changed. In the days that Councillor Mallard remembers, yes, the old people were old, but today's old people aren't old anymore. They're actually fitter and younger than some of the young people, and I'm totally into swings and all that kind of stuff. And I would love to, I'm so excited that finally Hamilton is first in something, and I'm sure we are first in something else, but not the things that I like. But one of the things I really think is looking at what the other countries are doing. I do follow the Netherlands. I look at a lot of things up there and what they do. And we have to think of that. We have to think of not shoving older people into these retirement homes far, far away from everybody else. We need to live together. We learn so much, and just listening to the young people that live amongst the older people in the Netherlands and how they what they get out of it. It's just amazing, the knowledge and the wisdom. I mean, we're not, just because we are over 60 or 70, we're not on the scrap heap. We're actually contributing. We can contribute so much. And I just think of the Chinese government. You can't actually get in until you're 70. So, you know, there's a lot of wisdom that comes with age, and so I'm really looking forward to this. Yes, there will be some challenges. Absolutely, there will be some costs, all that. But it will always happen. And whatever we do for the aging population is also works for mums with prams. It works for so many other people. It's not just for one single person. And I just think it's great if we make the footpaths wider and the cycleways wider for older people with their scooters. That's fine by me. So yeah, just bring it on. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Thank you, Dame Peggy, for picking this up and running with it when we didn't reset up the Older Persons Council, and you just picked this up and kept going with it. And thank you, Nick, for your support and for working closely with Peggy. It's fantastic. And I think the one big thing here, Peggy, that you've said to me, which really rings loud and strong, is that what's good for young people, what's good for old people is good for young people. What's good for old people is good for all of us. And I really think you build your city for the old people, and it'll work for all, including your disadvantaged groups as well. If it works for old people, it works for them. So I think it cascades down right the way through if we start at the top and get this right. And there is such a thing as old people. My father is in his 80s now, and he is old, and he still lives a full life. But there are things that he can't do anymore like he used to be able to do, and we need to set up our city to cater for all by starting at the top. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you very much. I'll just speak very briefly because everything has been said, but the way I say, and everyone's so enthusiastic, so that should give you good heart. We wish you the very best for the presentation in March, yeah, to the World Health Organization, is it? I'm just...
The Office of Seniors and others have called me up, and they have asked me to give half an hour coverage of what we're doing. And with a bit of luck, the Minister of Seniors, Tracy Martin, will pick it up and talk about Hamilton in that context.
Okay, thank you very much.
So already there is a direct line there. None of us will unfortunately go to Geneva to carry it, but we will hear back from them, I hope, in maybe April or so.
Oh, that's a shame. But we wish you luck when you're there, and I share the enthusiasm and support of my colleagues around the table. I think a lot of this is about us doing business as usual to a very high standard, and keeping this lens over what we do in our business as usual. And Councillor McPherson's committee does a lot of this kind of work around the transport related areas already, with alternatives to roading and other initiatives that are going on. Aren't we glad that we have the Kirsty curb here in Hamilton, and all credit to the person who designed that. So those kind of things are where we can make a real difference. I think it's very exciting altogether, and look forward to your regular reports to us,
that's right.
and keeping abreast of the actions that are actually implemented as a result of this, because I think that's the challenge going on. So thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you to our guests who've come today. Very much appreciated. I'm going to put it to the vote. We'll do it by button, just to make it easier for staff.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. As we are going to break after the next item at 11:45, are you comfortable to carry on without a short break at this point in time? Yes? Okay, everybody seems reasonably comfortable, so we will carry on and go to the next item, which is the upgrade of the Dame Hilda Ross Place. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mayor Andrew and elected members. So the purpose of this report is to inform you on options to upgrade the area on the corner of Ward Street and Worley Place, where the Dame Hilda Ross commemorative art piece is to be located. You'll remember that at the 14th of December council meeting, it was resolved that the area be named Dame Hilda Ross Plaza, and you requested that staff bring back a report today on options. So I think probably best to just take it for granted that you're all aware of the history here, and move through to the options that are presented in the paper. So option 1 is a status quo. So this retains all the hard landscaping that's on site, including the brick paving, the brick planters, the seating and the trees. The sculpture would be established in the centre of the site, and we would do a bit of cleaning and replanting just to spruce this place up. Advantages, obviously there's no additional funding required, it's easy to do, and the replacement planting would allow for some better visibility. It does, however, represent a missed opportunity to initiate a project that could contribute towards a vibrant city centre, and further work with Toti. There is a risk that the sculpture would appear not well integrated into the space, so it may just look like it's been plonked in there, and a potential for the sculpture to add to the clutter. If you refer to the concept plans on page 67, you'll note that there's already a lot of elements on that site. 66, 67, there's rubbish bins, there's a well electrical box, which Margaret alluded to earlier. Then we had option 2, which also retains some of the current landscaping, including the brick paving, the planters and the trees. We would still do the cleaning and replacement planting, but we would allocate some funds to allow for the minor upgrade, relocating the well energy box, rubbish bins, reducing the size of one of the planters to allow a better pedestrian flow, and install the new seating. It would improve the public seating in the plaza area. It would allow for more pedestrian flow, increased impact and visibility of the sculpture, and could attract some third-party funding and in-kind services. And as Margaret mentioned, Toti have already been active and negotiated a half-price discount on the moving of the well energy box. Disadvantages, it would be of a lower standard than recently completed projects and upcoming projects. We still would have the brick paving and brick planting. It does require some funding and would involve some noise and disruption. It's estimated that that minor upgrade would come at a cost of $50,000, and on page 63 there's an outline of how that $50,000 would be spent. Option 3 is the concepts on page 69 through to page 72, and that's the full blow-in upgrade of the space. So it retains the specimen trees but replaces the black paving, new seating, provides new surface treatment, and would match in with the recent Ward Street paving upgrade. So that one provides an opportunity for the public to sit and interact with the art piece, would provide impact on time with the street, renaming an art installation, a sheltered space to sit. It requires significantly more funding than options 1 and 2. So I think at this point, I'll leave it there and open up for questions.
Just one other thing you need to be aware of. We put B or C, so we've given you some options there. Obviously, mainly to do with the money involved. Since we wrote this report, it's become clear that there's a saving in the Victoria on the River project that's come in under budget, around the 200,000 mark. Natasha, who's project managing there, is just doing the final wash up around that. We'll report that back to council, but if you're inclined to put forward C as a recommendation, then the final few words could be covered by a saving from the VOTR project.
Thank you, Lance. Just to note that I would be happy to move C with that amended wording if I had a seconder, just when it comes up. Seconded, Councillor Gallagher. Thank you. We'll take questions. Councillor McPherson.
I was actually going to move A and C, but that's all right.
We're in school question time, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just foreshadowing I'm going to move that.
Yeah.
That's in seconder, that's all. With the amended words that was with the money to come from the shortfall, the underspend of Victoria and the River. Yeah. It'll go up.
I would have recommended you actually keep the wording as it is and let management decide that, because they haven't actually seen that savings finally yet. To be better, just more that's within the CEO's delegated authority, but okay. I don't think it's a big issue. But look, my other question related to the timing of this, Maria. When could option 2 be done, the physical work?
So option 2, as Margaret said, we could, if the funding's approved, we could start with the well energy box movers being one of the more complicated pieces this year. It's in
this current financial year?
Yes. It's envisaged that the art piece and the renaming will be timed for early 2019, so the upgrade of the space will be timed to get maximum impact.
Okay, no, that's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, I guess 2 questions. One, I see a mention that obviously Toti's prepared to come in to meet some of the fundraising requirements. With this 50,000 though, on page 63, there's an allocation of 10,000 for relocate rubbish bins, remove seating, and 20,000 for supply and install new seating, so 30 grand. And then down in question, or point 35, it says costs for these 2 options are based on concept and would need to be confirmed following detailed design and prior to construction. So I sort of feel, is it a little bit cart before horse, and that we're sort of saying it's going to cost 30 grand, but we haven't actually confirmed pricing. So I'm just a little bit dubious as to, that seems a lot of money to remove and replace rubbish bins. So while I might be supportive of option 2, I'm wondering, can we not get firmed pricing cheaper, and would Toti come to the party there as well?
So yes, that would be a possibility. Toti have a fundraising target for the art piece, as I understand it, $250,000. They have indicated that they're happy to partner with us. The budget allocation that I've outlined there is an indication of what it would cost to deliver the concept. So there would be some detailed design to work out. Basically what we would normally do is put elements in and out to make it fit the 50,000. So it's just a bit of a rider, I guess, that it may not look exactly like you see in the concept when the final prices come in.
And that's why we're putting the recommendation up to 50,000. So if Margaret Mavora wave their magic wand really hard and I think, you know, their first priority is to raise the funds for the sculpture, and then obviously if they're really successful in that, and we don't know, sometimes there could be some other philanthropic donor who comes along. We saw that the other week with the entertainment for the Victoria on the River area, out of the discussions at a committee meeting, so we had someone come along. So it's keeping our options open. So what we'd do is if someone came along, then obviously council's contribution would decrease, so that's why we've put up to 50,000 there. And, you know, so if that happened, then we'd let councillors know that that's the case.
Okay, did that answer your question? You have a further question, Councillor Hamilton?
No, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, mine was related to the fundraising aspect as well. Obviously Toti does a spectacular job with fundraising, and the sculpture is the main priority for it. You mentioned if somebody comes along, Lance, in terms of fundraising, if we were to go with option 2, are we, or is someone actively approaching businesses in the area for fundraising? I mean, what about Starbucks itself? Are they going to be asked for some, I mean, they're going to benefit from this, I would have thought. What's the plan there? Is CBD Association involved, etc.?
Yeah, so definitely this would be viewed as a collaboration project between council and Toti, and there would be some instances where perhaps it's more appropriate for Toti to make some approaches and council to make some approaches, so we would work together on those sorts of things.
Right, so okay, so we'll be actively going out and approaching, not just waiting?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Given the discussion we just had previous to your sitting there about the age-friendly stuff, is it all cobblestones here?
It's all brick pavers. Yeah.
Are they cobblestones? Are they the equivalent of cobblestones? They're those things. So it's not paving.
No.
Okay. So, and this is what I just was talking about. You know, not only 5 seconds ago, probably a little more than 5 seconds ago, that we're in a conflict here because. Do you want to make this, we'd want older folks to be able to walk around there, actually anyone to walk around there without being in danger of tripping over or whatnot. And we all know that cobblestones over time loosen and become, dangerous is probably a bit harsh word, but unstable. So what thought has gone into that?
So that's where option 3 comes in, which
Yep.
is a complete resurfacing of the site.
And what would the resurfacing consist of?
So that would consist of a similar treatment to Ward Street, which is a asphalt flat surface with inlaid pavers. It's smooth.
That's the $400,000 job.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thank you. My question actually follows on from Councillor Mallett. If we were, as a matter of a standard renewal in that area, would we be doing the option 3? If the asset management plan said that that particular area needed to be renewed, would we be into option 3 and be putting in the smooth surface rather than relaying cobblestones?
So I guess I asked the transportation unit about renewal of the area, and it's not due anytime soon because it was relayed as part of City Heart. But yes, I would suspect that it would be a consideration in a renewal.
Would it not be automatic, or would it be a consideration?
Well, I would assume it would be a consideration based on a number of things, including funding allocation.
How far down in the asset management plan is that area for, if the asset management plan tells us in 5 years or 10 years or 3 years that we need to do some renewal work, some significant renewal work there?
It's my understanding that it's not within the 10 years.
Not within the 10 years, okay. In recommendation C, you've got the words covered from a savings of a capital project. Is that the project you mentioned earlier on from the VOTR?
Yeah, that's correct. So what we're trying to do as a senior leadership team, if there's any opportunity that arises, or we have some sort of crisis or something like that, we try and offset the additional expenditure with a saving from elsewhere, and obviously that goes onto the risks and opportunities register, so there's ins and outs rather than you guys just seeing it Finance Committee, just a burgeoning sort of, red side of the ledger. So that's the discipline we're trying to put into all of these types of requests.
Okay. And just the last question is, in options 2 and 3, in the disadvantage panels, you've got some noise and disruption to local retailers, and I'm just mindful of what was in the media in the last week or so about that group there. Have we thoroughly consulted with, and you've got Starbucks being the major retailer who would be affected by the remedial work that would need to be done. Have we had robust conversations with them to explain what the disruptions would be and how we could best mitigate with them any adverse reactions that could come through?
So we've had initial discussions with Centre Place, Starbucks and the Business Association, but as we've not got a concept approved, we haven't had the detailed discussion about what it might look like yet.
Okay, do you think the disruptions are going to be, you've got minimal here.
Yeah.
So you think they'll be minimal anyway, irrespective of what work is being done?
Options 1 and 2 would be obviously more minimal than option 3. So we would be completely ripping up the space and we'd need some serious talks with the business owners. We would still be consulting with the business owners.
Okay, and there's nothing adverse at this stage and there's no missing links in our discussions that could lead to the sort of media reactions that we've had, just recently on this whole project?
It's very early days, as I say, so the concepts have been discussed with those names I named, but we would go out after today with further discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we'd be as comprehensive as we were when we removed the trees from Anglesey Street. That was quite a significant project, and we had a number of our staff visiting and on a number of occasions liaising with the local business owners there, so they knew exactly what was going on, when it was happening. If there's any deviations to those planned works through to weather or contractor availability or whatever, we kept them up to date the whole time, and I think Chris's team have got a good track record with that.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor O'Leary.
Chair, just back to Starbucks. We've had conversations with them, haven't we? So are they going to tidy up their facade, because they do stand to benefit from a piece of art, and which will benefit their business and their foot traffic? And I did notice that the outside of their business is looking a little bit less loved than it could. So what's the conversation with them?
Again, that would be definitely the conversation to come. Once we know what we're going to be doing, it will give us a little bit more leverage potentially to have that discussion.
Okay. What costs have been involved in other public art installations? Because this council some years ago moved away from, having the politicians decide on the public art and installing it, to supporting and enabling the community to do it. But we don't really necessarily have a budget to, if a site is picked, to tiz it up a little bit, do we?
No, the budget we do have is a reasonably modest budget to assist with the installation of the artwork, such as maybe consent fees or design issues and things like that. So if you remember, there's a
50.
Yeah, I think it's
50,000.
50,000, and in most years we get 2 or 3 artworks, and that gets gobbled up pretty quickly, just depending on the location, the size of the artwork, and generally that's not for putting in paving or any zhuzhing up of an area or anything like that. It's generally to do with the actual installation of the artwork itself.
Okay. And thank you for mentioning the VOTR and doing a little bit more work, because that was a question that I had at the council meeting, I think it was. Thanks. That's all my question.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. Just a very quick question of mine before we go back to Councillor Mallett. That paving issue is interesting to me. You were explaining about follow on from Councillor Pascoe's about renewals and maintenance. The concrete and borders down Ward Street, that was what the designers had proposed for option 3. So that would be a continuation of that really quite attractive paving solution right around that corner. I was told, maybe incorrect, I was told that, because it stops just right by the door of Starbucks, literally, and then goes back into cobbles. I was told that originally that was planned to have been completed within 4 years anyway. Was that, I mean, I don't know if you can answer that, and maybe more Chris's team, but it was indicated to me that those shops had expected a continuation of that nicer paving solution a while ago. Is that not true?
I'm not aware. I have put the question to Chris's team and haven't had a response yet, but I can follow up, but I don't have it with me today.
Yeah, look, I am interested because I think it's pertinent to the question that Rob raised, and it is a more attractive and more stable paving surface and consistent with the rest of Ward Street as it presently is.
But certainly that was not raised in the conversations that I've had with Chris's team, and we did talk about options for funding the space, including the renewals, and it wasn't mentioned that it was deferred at any point. So.
Yeah, so that's what I would like to know what the sort of veracity of that statement was, but also following on from Councillor Hamilton's question, it appears that the movement of some of these things is expensive. Some of that's got to do with the underlying services. There's quite a complication of underground services in that site, isn't there?
Yeah, so there is a lot going on in the space, and it is outlined on page 66 of just how much is going on in the corner. So gas, fibre optics, you name it, it's there. And it is a small space, which does complicate the works.
So that would be why things like removing seats and rubbish bins could be more pricey than you would normally expect to see it, or is
Yeah,
not?
and I have built into that cost the cost of replacing the rubbish bins, because what is there is fairly average looking as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. And this is a question that's a little wider than the specific topic at hand, but I just want to understand what's the logic or the process or the procedure we have for, because Lance has kind of assumed that the underspend on Victoria on the River will come to this project, whereas there are a huge number of other projects and or other things, reducing debt or reducing rates, that money could be used. I mean, just the fact that we happen to have a $200,000 underspend on one project, there is absolutely no logic and no process that, oh, hey, there's a thing we're a bit short on, we'll take it over there, without going through a proper process of council, is there?
No, and that's why we gave you the option in B.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just the mere fact that it happens to be happening at relatively the same time, there's no reason why that $200,000 should not be spent on any one of 1,000 other things that are going on around the city rather than this particular project.
No, you're correct, but as I said before, we're just trying to get in the discipline of, rather than just doing the Oliver Twist thing and asking for more money, is actually saying, well, there is some savings here, but there could be other savings, and obviously they happen over a period of time, so we can only give you advice on what we know rather than what might be coming up.
So every one of those savings is available to be contested for everything that this entity does.
Absolutely, or just having a favourable budget at the end of the year.
I actually knew that. I just thought it was important that was raised.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of questions and into the debate. I've moved and Councillor Henry has seconded. Hang on, I'm just going to put... Oh yes, sorry, apologies. Councillor Gallagher, you seconded me. My apologies.
And end up with for the last bit there, whether you're going to specify a project or just talking about that the council management handle that through as per the written wording.
Look, I'm pretty relaxed about it. I'm happy to revert to the original C if you're happy to, Councillor Gallagher.
ANC is on the order paper.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that is what's on. Now we'll take any debate. As the mover, I would just like to say a few things and then move to the rest of us. I've always felt that this was an enormous opportunity to upgrade a public space so that it really becomes a destination of which the artwork itself is worthy. I think it's wonderful that we get so much voluntary input and outside money into establishing art in the city. I'm very grateful for that, and it's brought us a lot of really wonderful pieces of art for everyone to enjoy. I'm not a great fan of, therefore, just plonking somebody's very special art piece in an average space and hoping it will shine enough when you can spend a small amount of money and make it really worth going to see as a destination. In an ideal world, myself, I would have liked to have seen option 3. Notwithstanding a few details around this situation of the piano and the child sitting there, I would have liked to have seen something that created that corner as a real destination for people to enjoy in their lunch hours and work breaks, and for visitors to sit and enjoy the artwork as well. And I think we're going to fall a little bit short of that. However, I'm also confident that with option 2, we can achieve something that is nice and will give credit to the artwork, and that's what it's all about. Sometimes you don't have to spend millions to pull through a public space. Sometimes a small amount of money can provide a really unique experience, and that's the case all over the world, where small spaces are actually some of the most successful destinations. And that's why I was always really keen with a plaza. Bigger, grand things are not always best. Small and very special are sometimes very, very good, and that's where I was heading for that. I think that's all I will say on that. Thank you. We'll put Councillor Gallagher second as the seconder, if you don't mind. Councillor Bunting. Councillor Gallagher?
Oh.
Who seconded this?
No, I mean, I think obviously along with that goes the naming of the street to Dame Hilda Ross, and that is about Hamilton. And I think that's going to be, personally, a premier address, because around that we're going to have a fabulous opening, a launch, etc., etc. But it's also about Hamilton reclaiming its local history. Sappermore Jones is a very good example of that, where we're discovering and rediscovering the amazing heroes that lived and contributed to this community. And obviously, Dame Hilda Ross was very much one of those down-to-earth heroes. But obviously, thank you again to Toti and the team, and our former mayor and her team, and former Councillor Mavora, etc. I think this will be, when it finally happens, this will be a fabulous day for the city.
Thank you. Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd make 3 points in support of the motion. Firstly, I was against the naming of the street, and I still stand by that. But I respect the decision of the group, and we move on. And I think the plaza is great. I think the plaza is absolutely fantastic, and let's make the very best of it. The second point is, I take up on Councillor Hamilton's point that 30 k's to take out some rubbish bins and put them on a different side of the plaza seems quite a lot when Well Energy can rewire an entire power box and move it for 15k. And can I implore that we do it at the same time? If it does involve wiring and it does involve circuitry and anything under the ground, can we please do it at the same time rather than let Well do theirs and then dig it all up again and do it again? So there may be some cost efficiencies in that. And thirdly, what did you expect? What did you expect? We cannot just plonk a statue down in isolation. We do have to play a certain part, and I'm pretty sure we all saw this coming. We do need to do a little bit of work around it, which is great, because otherwise you do end up with Captain Hamilton. And while that's a wonderful statue, it's standing there all by itself with nothing around it, and it looks appalling. And we ought to be putting stuff around that. So stuff on itself doesn't look great, so we do have to play a part. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Just a point of correction on the Well Energy. It was originally 30 50,000. It was the 15 is because they've applied a discount, a generous discount to it for us. Yeah, but just so that, yeah, just for public correction on that one, that's all. Good points. Sorry, Councillor Henry.
Thank you so much. Well, I will support the motion as well. Yeah, just a couple of points. First of all, thank you so much for Toti to work so hard to get this statue done, or the Hilda Ross, a monument to Hilda Ross. What an awesome thing. I mean, in most cities you look around the world, people go to where there's something there to look at, and then they want to have a coffee usually. This is the culture today, and this is wonderful. In the ideal world, I would love to have the third idea, because I would love to have seen it double the size. Because when you go into other plazas and piazzas and everything, everything that's in the middle is bigger, much bigger. So you get attracted, you walk towards it, you want to see what's going on, and so this is still sort of Captain Hamilton's size a little bit, but it's going to look awesome. And as I said, in the ideal world, I would love to have the third idea there, but or concept. But I'll go with the second one. And with the rubbish bins, we will have recyclable, so people can put different things in. Yeah. That'll be cool, because that's really important to me. So, and they will be lovely, and they will fit into this area nicely as well. And if there is a possibility, I just go back to age-friendly, we probably need to look at getting the paver somehow out of there. And there must be some cheaper ways to do that. According to Councillor McPherson, we don't need everything gold-plated. We could just do it, I don't know, silver or whatever. Thank you so much, though, for the good work. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, just trying to read it. Lots of wrong glasses. That's not reading glasses. I will support the recommendation, but I will be watching carefully just to see how much outside funding we do attract. I felt with the Victoria on the River entertainment scheme recently, which I thought was pretty half-baked, we indicated strongly there that we don't expect ratepayers to be the first port of call all the time, and some businesses had a bit of a moan about that, but then I see they put their hands in their pocket, and so they should have. I agree with you, Paula, you can't just put a sculpture in without providing some sort of sympathetic environment, and we knew this was coming when we approved it back in December, and we knew there was going to be some associated costs to do it properly. We're upgrading a very public space in a very prominent, important part of town, I think. We owe it to that part of town, as well as the people who use it, not to do a cheap job, to make sure it looks good, and I don't think anyone could accuse this council of being extravagant in this particular case. I think we're going for a sensible option, and we're doing the best we can to keep the costs down.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I guess sort of similar vein to Councillor Jeff, there was a talk before about, if we earmark $50,000, but at the same time we'll seek private funding, it doesn't work. If business see council signalling money, no one's going to say we'll donate. They only donate when there's a shortfall and they need to step up, like what happened on Victoria on the River. Whilst I'm supportive of the whole, the corner site and everything, given some of the pressures we're facing with rates, I don't know quite protocol, being new boy, but I'd like to put forward an amendment that council limits spend to 25,000 on that corner, and be seeking a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there is an amendment now that the quantum be reduced. So what happens now, Councillor Hamilton, is you, as the mover of the amendment, should tell us why, and then, are we going to do it now, or, because we're halfway through debate, aren't we? Hang on, let me just take advice, please.
Neither of us have spoken in debate.
Yeah, no, let Leanne just provide us some guidance. And Ryan, usefully foreshadowing something before the debate.
Apologies.
No, I'm just saying it's useful sometimes to foreshadow it, because then we know it's coming. But I didn't say you had to.
What does useful mean?
It helps everyone understand what the options they're debating are.
Oh, okay.
Apologies. I'm on
No,
a
no,
fast
no,
track.
no. Look, you're doing very well. Your second meeting, isn't it? Yeah, so it is amendment. You haven't spoken, and so should he speak to his amendment now in his debate? What happens to, yeah, that's fine. Right, good, we'll go with that. So, Councillor Hamilton, you've made an amendment, you may speak to it.
Yeah, whilst I support Toti 100%, and I know what it's like when you're trying to raise funds, but as I iterated, I think if council sends a clear signal that we're capped at X amount, and then that gives us the opportunity, it gives the business community room to come in and partner with us, and I think that's something that I'd like to see a lot more of.
Okay, thank you. Just clarifying what happens with any of us who've already spoken, but in the meantime, the next two people haven't spoken, so we'll just go ahead until we get that advice. Councillor Tooman.
Yeah, look, I can't support $50,000 to shift a few rubbish tins around, move the old electricity box there. I actually prefer the status quo, because it's surprising just what can be done by our gardeners within this city as far as planting is concerned. You've only got to look at some of the roundabouts around here and they're absolutely beautiful. And I can't see why they can't actually do something with the planting down there to make this a far better looking place. A water blaster and these sort of things could make a hell of a difference down there, because it is looking pretty grotty, there's no two ways about that. And I would be voting for the option one, which is the status quo.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Look, I can appreciate where the last two speakers are coming from, but I don't actually agree with them. I think the up to 50,000 the staff put in there is a good recommendation. I don't think staff, having heard this discussion, are going to go away and think, beauty, we've got 50 grand to spend. That's not been the way they do things, and I can see some possible savings still there myself from the commercial sector, even with the up to 50 grand. And it's not correct to say that that would stop all possible commercial input, financial input into this. I can recall playgrounds, for instance, that we've put up where we've allocated a maximum spend and then had staff have gone out and sought contributions from service groups and commercial groups successfully. So I don't think that limits us. And one particular one I'd like to note, that I totally have done very good work to get well energy trusts down from 30 to 15, but I would say we should be doing a little bit more, lean on them a little to get it down to zero. They paid for something much more expensive out there, the electric charger, and it didn't cost the public a cent for that, because it was a good promotion for them and they could get some kudos out of doing the same here. So I would see that as an immediate saving possibility. And Starbucks may themselves want to come to the party, given that they're in the area and are going to benefit. I think quite rightly, I can't remember who it was that said that they were going to, it might have been Siggy, I think, that talked about how that's going to be an attractor to that area. Regarding Leo's comments about the planting out there, it's not so much the planting that's a problem there, it's the planter box is a massive, great impediment to anyone moving around in that area. If you've seen it, anything to reduce that size, maybe down to zero, and have the tree coming out of the pavement rather than out of a half-metre high planter box that actually shuts off half the area would probably be a good idea, but I'm not going to get into the detailed design here. I think that our staff will act responsibly with an up to 50,000 limit there. They've heard the debate. They're going to respond to that, and they always have in the past in this sort of area. And these sorts of parks and gardens, plaza type areas are the areas that we traditionally can more easily get support than for the roads and stormwater drains and things like that around the place. So I'm happy with the motion that's been put up there. I don't think it's linked to Victoria on the River money or anything like that. I think that staff have a responsibility within the overall budget of the organisation to fit things like this in here. It makes sense to do it, and I think they'll have a sensible approach to it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mallett is next.
Thank you, and I congratulate Ryan for his initiative. I think he's just earned about half his salary in his second meeting, if this goes through. Look, I support this. A saving of $25,000 is material. I am concerned, and I said this before, that the appendage at the end of C, noting that this could be covered by a saving from a capital project, does concern me. I mean, it looks a bit bland, I think, but it implies that we have made a decision to use the savings from Victoria and the River to cover this. And I don't think that is a decision that any councillor has made. Correct me if I'm wrong. That saving is to be used by us as we see fit, which might be improving.
Yeah, point of order
is that there is no specific capital project detailed in the motion there that was floated, but that was not included. It specifically was removed from consideration. So it's in a general way, a capital project, not the Victoria on the River, which is what Councillor Mallett is suggesting it is.
I suggest you're partly right because we removed the quantum, but it does indicate a capital project.
Yeah,
so
but not the Victoria on the River one.
Except that staff have plainly told us it's from Victoria on the River, so we can pretend we didn't hear that, or we can be honest about it and say, yep, staff have advised us this is from...
We often pretend we don't hear things, Gary.
Okay, so,
anyway,
so we're going to ignore reality and pretend we haven't heard something we have heard.
Thank you for your point, but I'm going to allow Gary to pursue his point for debate.
Okay, so thank you. So I'm concerned that we are travelling a road that we shouldn't be travelling with regard to the note there. And also I'm very supportive of saving some costs when they possibly can be saved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pascoe is next.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supporting the motion, not specifically because I want to spend $50,000, but I'm just a little bit concerned that these reports come to us with comments that we could attract some third-party funding and in-kind services without these having perhaps been nailed down a little more conclusively before the reports come through. And I think, referring to Councillor Taylor's discussion, we did have a half-baked idea on the Victoria on the River, and there was a response to that. But I don't think we can rely on businesses to keep coming back and topping us up because we make public decisions like this. So, look, I think the horse is bolted here. I want to get on with this project. I think 50,000 is, of course, double 25,000, but it's not a significant spend in the context of how this organisation spends ratepayers' money. And we've got Toti waiting in the wings, ready to get things underway. Let's not hold the process up simply because we perhaps internally need to get ourselves a little better organised in bringing these reports with some firm or tentative offers subject to approval from businesses or other philanthropic funders. Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am a big supporter of public art for the city and have been since my time on council. However, I won't be supporting the amendment or the motion for the following reasons. I think that council needs, through the LTP, to look at perhaps that $50,000 annual amount that we have for public art, and maybe that needs an increase from 50,000 to 100,000. But Councillor Pascoe said that Toti are sort of ready and waiting in the wings, and my concern is Embassy Park has been waiting for years and years and years for some funding, and Embassy Park was transformed from a terrible, unsafe public space into the actually internationally known public space that it is today, and I'm very proud to have supported that. That was started from the community because the council said, no, if you want it, you need to do it yourself. And I acknowledge the work that Toti and also Mesh Sculpture Trust have done. They've gone out and they've just done it, and they've contributed to some incredible public art for the city. I am very supportive of opportunities to improve public space, but when I look at Embassy Park and I look at the work that the community has done and contributed, and yet the bottom half of that will connect, hopefully will connect to an upper promenade, is left just to sit there and stagnate. It's simply not a planned and fair way to go about it. So for those reasons and those reasons only, I will not be supporting the amendment or the motion.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. I do have a right of reply, but I'm going to keep this fairly to point. Actually, just picking up on Councillor O'Leary's views on Embassy Park, I totally support those in terms of getting the next stage done. I absolutely agree with her that they are waiting with no signal as to when they'll get support for the next part of that project, and it has been a phenomenal project, and you have shown leadership on that project, and I think it's right for you to continue to advocate for them. Notwithstanding that, this is not a competition between Embassy and Dame Hilda Ross Plaza in this instance. If we do nothing, this is just a street corner. It's just a street corner. That's what it is at the moment, a street corner with some unattractive planter boxes and actually some unattractive plants within those planter boxes. And we've got an opportunity here to create another public space that works better, that is lovely, and attracts people from those major shopping areas. I mean, it's nestled with the big shopping centre there, to come out and enjoy their lunchtime or their breaks, and also for visitors that are undertaking retail in the central city to be exposed to some art and history at the same time. I think placement of sculptures is very important, and we know this because you look at how fantastic the warhorse placement is in the park. If that was hiding behind a bushel and you were made to find it accidentally, it wouldn't have half the same appeal as it does in that beautiful sweep of the bend that it's in. I would like to think that conversations will go on with the partners about funding, and to speak for staff, in support of staff, they actually have been doing as much as practical alongside Toti to have conversations with people who might take an active interest in this space. Therefore, I would like to think that if any extra money came in from the public, it didn't reduce the 50,000, it actually increased the delivery of the project, things that we can do with the project. So yes, you know, obviously I am very supportive of this. As I say, it's not a multi-million-dollar project, but it is a project that can deliver a lot for a little. So on that, I will put the amendment. Oh, sorry.
That's correct, the move.
Reply if you want it, Councillor Gallagher.
Very generous. Look, this, I'm doing a right of reply apparently.
In the event.
Yeah, no, sure. Look,
I have been advised by governance.
Normally that's correct, Councillor Mallett, but in the event that an amendment is moved during debate, the mover and the seconder of the original motion have the opportunity to speak once to any amendment put.
standing orders is a wonderful art we get hold of. Very, very quickly, Toti and the community are making a huge contribution. The return on your up to $50,000 investment is huge. Let's do this well. Let's do this well, because the return for the city is massive in my view. And all the up to $50,000 doesn't. I agree with Rob Pascoe. It just gives us latitude and leeway to really land a really good, high-profile public space honouring one of the city's great daughters.
Okay, thank you. We're going to put the amendment first, as is process. So that is what Councillor Hamilton moved, with seconded by Councillor Mallett, which is a halving of the amount proposed. We'll take a vote on that, please, by button.
The amendment is lost. 4 for, 9 against.
Thank you, councillors. We will now move to the substantive motion, which is the up to 50,000, and we'll vote now.
The motion is carried. 11 for, 2 against.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. And given that we were going to stop in 5 minutes for an update, I think we will stop now because we have been sitting quite a while. And if councillors would convene in the other room, we've got an update. And after the update, we'll take our lunch break. And if we could all be back at the table by 1:30, would that seem reasonable? All right, thank you.